Welcome back to the Hardware Unbox podcast for episode 78. We're going to be talking about some motherboard updates to start with and a few other things. And then our main topic for this week is, are we being a bit negative about the GPU market and gaming, PC gaming sort of thing in general? So we're going to break down a couple of different things about reviews and comparisons and where all of that lies. Are we being negative? Yeah, a bit torn on that one. So anyway, let's get into it. Well, Steve, we're back on the podcast and we have thought about the topics for this one well in advance. We weren't struggling or anything trying to come up with stuff to talk about because of the complete lack of news. None of that's happened. It's going to be a fantastic podcast for people to listen to. Great, well thought out topics from us, lots of notes. It's a good one. So kick us off with all the exciting stuff.
Well, I can talk a little bit about my B850 struggles if you'd like to hear about them.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
So I'm seeing comments on every video, when's the B850 roundup coming? What's going on? When are you doing it? And obviously I've been working on it for really months now. I was planning on releasing part 1 next week because I will have to do it in a few different parts. Eventually there will be like the ultimate B850 roundup, but it just hasn't gone that smoothly. I'll explain that a bit in a moment. So part 1 was next week, but we have some new AMD CPUs that we have to cover. So I've prioritized that. That's an embargoed release. So get that out of the way. And then hopefully the following week, I'll have the first wave of B850 testing. If it's not that week, it'll be the week after, I promise. I'm very close. I've pretty much got everything I need now. So the B850 thing has just been weird. A lot of companies, Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, less so ASRock, they were pretty on it. But the other three, the big three, announced a whole heap of B850 motherboards a long time ago now. Like we're talking last year, right? And some of them, I think the worst offenders are probably Gigabyte and in particular MSI. MSI announced a heap of boards and then they continued to announce boards. But then some of the first wave boards I still haven't got. They haven't even entered production yet. So the board's been announced. People are expecting it. And I've been getting like an MSI board, a B850 board, like once a month. They're like, oh, we've finally got this new one. We'll send that out to you. And some of them have been that early production that I haven't even got packaging with them, which is fine. I just really need the board to let you guys know how it performs. ASRock really sent all their boards straight away, and there was only 1 or 2 additional ones I required. But yeah, Gigabyte and MSI, I just think I'm ready to release like the initial, say, sub $200 offerings, and then they have another board that looks really appealing, and I don't want to miss that board because if the content goes live and then 2 weeks later you can buy this potentially better value board, I want to make sure that's included. So anyway, I'm going to have a cutoff period because it's just been dragging on and on. We're over 50 motherboards now, and I just recently got about 6 new, more entry-level boards that'll be in part 1. And I think I think I've got everything now. Basically, I'm going to spend the next few days testing those boards, get all that data in, and like I said, I've got the new AMD CPU next week, or CPUs, and then that content will go after that. So whatever I've got in 2 weeks' time will be in part 1. But it's been unusual. Traditionally, a new chipset, new platform, new series gets announced, and they just, announce their lineup, and over the coming weeks, they kind of all end up on shelves, and there you are. But some of these boards are 6, 7, 8 months old, and there's still no availability of them. And then I was telling you just the other night about this, Tim, that in typical Asus fashion, their most affordable, most entry-level motherboards just aren't being sold in Australia. So there's no way they could sample those boards to me for the roundup. So the most affordable Asus boards I've got are like $200 US. So it's like the tough gaming. There's 2 versions of that board. I think one's an ATX and one's an MATX. And that's they're the lowest end boards they could possibly provide for the roundup. And then it's, all the Strix, ROG Strix boards after that are, very expensive. Very good boards, but very expensive. And look, the tough boards are very good, but they have the Prime series and they have like the B850 M-K. And so they're making these boards and they are selling them to people At the moment, though, they're being selective with the regions in which these boards are available, mostly the Prime series. So Australia wasn't one of the chosen regions. I don't think the US was either. But what always happens here is I don't know if these are crappy boards, but let's just say historically, the crappy, certainly less desirable motherboards have been held back and released later. So we do all our testing. I guess reviewers who would potentially buy these boards make all the content they're going to make and then move on from that chipset. And then they filter out all the crappy boards and get them, circulate them through all the channels. And then people are like, oh, look, there's a Prime board here that's, $100 cheaper than Tough Gaming. I'll just get that. And maybe it's not a good board. I don't know. So anyway,
imagine there's some OEM stuff there as well, like the lowest end stuff. They get a bulk order for some system or another. Mm-hmm. It initially goes in that run, and then you see the excess stock starting to hit the market 6 months after B850 launches. So that happens as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's I suppose more legitimate reason for that happening. I don't know their exact reason. They didn't give me a reason for why the Prime boards aren't available in our regions, but I'm pretty certain at some point in the not too distant future, those boards will just start showing up in other markets, possibly ours. So anyway, because I had virtually no sub $200 US boards from ASUS, I really wanted to include these boards. I mean, the boards exist. They're on their website. They're, and you can get them in other regions. So I found the Prime boards and the M-K in Ireland of all places. So I ended up ordering well over 1,000 Australian dollars worth of low-end ASUS B850 motherboards from, I think, a company called MemoryC.com. And apparently they're based in Ireland. It wasn't really apparent to me at the time when I was ordering. It was just a website that had them and said they would ship to Australia. So I'm like, that's good enough for me. I need these boards. So I ordered them and they got them to me quite promptly. Unfortunately, the B850 M-K was dead on arrival. There was no physical damage to the board. I tried everything, refused to power on, tried BIOS flashback, all that sort of stuff. Just board was dead, did not power up at all. So I requested an RMA. They were on it instantly, sent me what I needed. It ended up costing me about $60 to send it back to Ireland to get replaced, but did that. And they got our replacement board out to me pretty quick. I think it was a 2-week turnaround, which I think's for international RMA process is pretty good. And they were really good about it. They weren't difficult to deal with at all. So never dealt with them before, but they were fantastic. I now have my replacement board. I don't know if it works though. I haven't had a chance to actually install it and test it. So that'll probably be a job for tomorrow. So I'll test that board, and that's one of the few boards that I have remaining to test.
That's a better RMA process than when I had to send back the Samsung Odyssey Neo G8 to the US, which is a monitor. Yep. I bought that through Amazon, and I mentioned in the review there were some issues with it. So I tested because I bought it and then sent it back to get a refund from Amazon. And I bought it from Amazon US. So while we have Amazon in Australia, Amazon Australia, and some items you can buy through Amazon Australia that are then from Amazon US, you can also buy directly from Amazon US, which is what I did with that monitor. So this is a little confusing there, direct from the Amazon US website. To do the RMA though, I had to send it back to the US, which ended up costing me something around 300 Australian dollars, $300 to $400. Luckily, the box was small enough that Australia Post was able to send it, as opposed to DHL or one of those that would have cost me a lot more money. But Amazon, I contact them. I'm like, I need to do this RMA. And I'm like, so where do I send it to? And they're like, oh, you've got to, take it to your local FedEx, drop-off point or something, and they'll do it for you and send it back. I'm like, well, we don't have FedEx drop-off points in Australia. That's not a thing. I'm going to have to physically send it to a certain address. Can you tell me where that address is? And they're like, oh, we're going to have to figure out if it's do you send it somewhere in Australia and then they forward it to us in the US, or do we have to send it direct to the US? And so I ended up having to call them on a number, like a phone number in the US during US operating hours. So I was calling them at like, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night, midnight or something, trying to get this sorted out. Eventually they did send me just an address, and it was some random like warehouse or something. I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. Like, we'll find out. We'll see. And then, just put that label on the box, hope for the best. It wasn't like an official Amazon barcode or anything. It was just the label on it. And eventually I did get refunded. So it did work, but it was certainly much more dicey than what you were just describing, where you send it back to Ireland, fairly affordable, all done for you. Yeah, the thing with Amazon US was a bit of a nightmare. But then again, like, I'd imported it from the Amazon US website and all that stuff, and large items are a bit more difficult to deal with. So, yeah.
Yeah, so the process with them was good. And I've got actually just one last thing. I've got a few Gigabyte boards that I have to retest because I found that a few of them were power limited, so they're more entry-level boards. And we've seen ASRock do a bit of that over the years. Some of the ASRock entry-level boards were also power limited, but you could go into the BIOS, play with the PBO settings and remove like the PPT limit and, get the processor running at full performance. Of course, the motherboard's VRM did run hotter, but in the case of the ASRock boards, there was no throttling or anything. It worked. So that was good. Gigabyte limited some of their boards quite aggressively, and it was a hard lock, so you couldn't adjust those power limits. There was no way. It was just locked at the BIOS level. Apparently, they had quite a few complaints from people who had bought those boards and wanted to run higher end CPUs so that were getting power limited, or enable like PBO on CPUs that would have run within that spec but then would exceed it and then weren't seeing any gains. So they've apparently, I don't know if they've released it to the public yet. They told me it should be by this point in time, but I haven't had a chance to go look. But there should be some BIOS updates for like the B850 gaming, and I think it's the D3 HP and stuff like that, where the limit's still in place, but it's the ASRock approach. You can now toggle something in the BIOS to remove the hard limit, and then you can, it'll give you some warning about, maxing out, the VRM capability basically. But like, I still don't like how if you go to the CPU support list, all of these entry-level boards like the B850M D3 HP, it'll say that it supports the Ryzen 9 9950X, and it lists the wattage at 170 watts. Now, it's listing the specification of the CPU, but the CPU support page says it supports CPU model Ryzen 9 9950X, wattage 170 watts. But I know for a fact that board shipped with a 140 watt limit, couldn't exceed that. So it reduced the performance of that CPU, not significantly, but you weren't getting the stock performance of the CPU.
It's pretty misleading to have it listed there with 170 watts, but then it actually runs at 140 watts. Like, I know they would claim we've just listed what the CPU is, but a casual buyer is going to interpret that to mean that is the wattage the CPU is going to run at on this board. If it's listed in a support table, that's what I would have thought it would mean at first glance. So yeah, that's bad.
And to be clear, it's not just Gigabyte who do this, and it's not just the B850 motherboards. This has been a problem, in my opinion, forever. Yeah. And all motherboard manufacturers do it. There isn't one that doesn't. They all do it. And there's been some bad examples over the years. Like, we've seen boards that claim to support like 300 watt CPUs and stuff like that. Over 200 watt CPUs, and they're limited to 90 watts. And it's like a hard limit that you can't exceed. And even then at 90 watts, the board runs really hot because it's like a crappy 4-phase VRM or V-Core. So yeah, it wasn't that bad hard locked. It's good that they've unlocked it now though, because the board didn't run that hot when limited to 140 watts. Not that that's everything. But anyway, I would really like to see these CPU support lists changed to state, first of all, what the power limit of the board is, because nowhere does this board say that it's power limited. And that's another big problem. So I'm looking at the page now, it says it's got a 5+2+2 digital VRM design. If you scroll down, it'll probably tell you how amazing their VRM is. Yeah, delivers consistent high-powered performance to elevate your overclocking to the next level. So that's
they always say that.
That's so bad on a board that was limited to 140 watts and couldn't even run a lot of the CPUs. Well, a lot of the higher end CPUs. And look, the argument, the pushback we always get, which is just such a disservice to them, like it's shooting yourself in the foot, is who's going to put a 9950X on an entry-level B850 motherboard? Like, that's just ridiculous. Who's going to do that? It's like, well, I get what you're saying, but someone probably will. But that's not the point. The point is they're advertising that you can do that. And they're even saying that you'll get great overclocking capabilities and stuff with the board. And if you click on support and then you click CPU support, actually it's the second CPU. The first one's the X3D part. But the two top CPUs are Ryzen 9 170 watt CPUs. So it's not really a good argument to say, oh, but who would, buy a cheap motherboard and put that CPU on it? It's absolutely not the point. But anyway, so I've got to retest those Gigabyte boards to see how they perform with the power limits removed, how hot they get and all that sort of stuff. So a bit of updating to do there. Get that done over the weekend. But yeah, hopefully, not the next podcast, but the podcast after that, we can talk about some of the B850 results that I've published. So we'll see. Fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, that certainly sounds good to me. I'm keen to see how that testing goes.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into the topic we thought about 1 second before this podcast started recording, I'm going to talk about a phone for a moment because I bought...
Phones are exciting, Tim.
You
sure you don't want to save that for boring life?
Normally, I would have said buying a new phone is extremely boring because all phones look exactly the same. They all perform the same. They have the same cameras. Phones are boring now. And this is coming from me who used to test phones, like review them. That was my main job at TechSpot back when I was working there. So I had a lot of experience using phones when they were sort of more exciting. Like they would actually have significant changes between one and another. Now they're just all boring and come in the exact same form factor, but not the new phone that I bought. So for the last 2 years, I've been using the Samsung Z Fold 5, which I think I talked about at some point a while ago when I decided to buy a folding phone. And yeah, it's been going fine for the last 2 years. But there's been a few... What are you laughing about?
So I'm glad you asked. It's like, when you... I don't even know, like I always, whenever we're out and about and I catch up with Tim, like Computex is a good example. And we need to learn some information that's easily Googleable. Googleable?
Yeah, Googleable, I guess.
When something's easy to find, I just say, Tim, could you quickly check? Because first of all, Tim's usually reaching for his phone and halfway to doing exactly that. But I just love it because he gets his phone out and he folds it out.
Yeah.
He folds it out
info mode.
And then starts using it. It's just I don't know why I find it so amusing, but it's just because it's like he has the same animation every time he does it, and he folds his phone out and he gets me the answer straight away, and he's kind of, I don't know, he looks oddly satisfied unfolding his phone to get me the answer. So I just, cracks me up. We went out for dinner the other night for a work meeting with Balin and Tim, and I don't know, we were arguing about something or talking about something. I said, Tim, Google it. He's folded his phone out at the table and found it. So yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
It's good for stuff like that.
I don't know why I find it amusing. I just do. So I'm just
you
weird
just
like
need
that.
You need to become a folding phone user. You'll join the club and you'll get it then. You'll get the folding phone thing. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm one of those people that uses one daily. You obviously see phone reviewers and stuff who don't necessarily use them or just use like iPhones or the standard Galaxy things. I know you just have like a Galaxy S phone, the standard stuff. I've been using the folding phone, really like the format. I think it's great. Obviously, the Z Fold 5 has some flaws, which I'll talk about briefly. But I'm not usually someone that wants to upgrade my phone every year. But with the Z Fold 5, the back, so I've got it here. This is my old phone. You probably won't be able to see this too well if you're watching the video version. because it's actually very hard to see. But essentially the back plate of the phone, which is glass, it started to peel off very slightly from the chassis of the phone. So instead of being sort of flush with the metal edge, it was raised by a couple of millimeters, which sort of created this like sharp edge. But then also like, I could start to actually peel the back of the phone off, exposing the components and stuff. So I thought eventually that's probably going to break in a more severe and devastating way. So that wasn't great. And then the inside screen as well comes with a pre-applied screen protector. I'm not sure if I talked about the whole disaster of trying to get that replaced with Samsung, because Samsung do offer in-warranty screen protector replacements, but they require you to send your entire phone back to their location. You don't have a phone for a couple of days or weeks, or however long it takes them to do it, and then they send it back. You can't just do it in store, which is pretty stupid. So I didn't do that. Just peeled off the screen protector, which started to sort of break a little bit along the fold seam on the inside screen, because obviously the screen protector has to fold with the screen. Started to peel off at the top of the seam on the screen. So didn't affect the usability or anything. Once I pulled it off, phone still worked fine, but sort of, the durability was probably getting to the end of its life. From 2 years from a phone that cost about $2,000 is not great, but early adopter sort of stuff. So I was thinking about getting a new phone. I was sort of like primed to see what the new Z Fold would have done from Samsung, or Z Fold if you're in the US. And they ended up releasing this form factor, the new Z Fold 7, which I've got here, Z Fold 7, which is completely different and solves a whole bunch of other problems I had with the phone. So first of all, this phone is too heavy, which is something that I wouldn't have thought would ever be a real problem if you have normal hands. But I usually rest my phone like this. So if you're seeing this on the video version, resting it on my pinky finger at the bottom. When you have a phone that weighs over 250 grams over time, your fingers can get a little sore doing that. So it was too heavy. It's thick as well. It's a bit of a chungus, which isn't great. So there's that. But the main thing is just it's very thin. It's a thin looking phone from the front. So when you're using the front screen, it has a weird aspect ratio. It's thin. Some apps don't work well on that. And obviously when you open it, it's totally fine. But also with the inside screen, if you're doing side-by-side apps, it's the same aspect ratio as the front screen. So basically the side-by-side apps also have a weird aspect ratio. And there's a crease and stuff in it, which isn't, ideal. But basically, Samsung decided they'll change the form factor and fixed all those problems. So it's now much lighter and thinner. Looks like a normal phone from the front, so you don't look like an idiot pulling it out of your pocket.
I want to test it. Hey, can you Google what CPUs AMD is releasing next week?
Oh yeah, easily. I'll just power up my phone right now and unfold it like this, and then I'm ready to go with the phone ready to go.
It wasn't authentic. It didn't seem right.
Yeah, it's a bit weird on a podcast having to do it. Normally, I have to avoid the microphone and stuff to do it on camera. Basically, the reason why I bought it and why I spent another $2,000 plus on a phone is they decided to solve all the problems I've had using the phone over the last 2 years. So, the front screen is now usable, has a nice aspect ratio. It's much better to use. Apps actually look usable on the front screen, makes that screen better to use. The crease in the inside screen is a lot lower, so it's much harder to notice. You don't feel it swiping across the entirety of the inside screen when it's open. So that sort of divot, I guess, is less pronounced now, which is a lot better, thinner, lighter. So it's a big upgrade for someone that's used this phone for a long time. The battery, normally I would only upgrade a phone because its battery life's getting bad or something, like it's not lasting out the day. That's never really been a problem over the last 2 years using the Z Fold 5. It's always been fine, lasted a day. So didn't upgrade for that reason. Didn't upgrade for cameras, performance, all of that was fine. The old version got the new software update from Samsung, so the software looks exactly the same. But just like an actual form factor change that made a big difference to my life. So this phone is much better. So that's just my thoughts. I'm sure there's people out there, like 2-3 people listening to this podcast that are interested in phones. Maybe we're considering upgrading to a Z Fold 7. It's actually only supposed to be released tomorrow local time, but when I pre-ordered it, they sent it out like a few days ago. So that's only my opinion. So I'm using it for a few days. But if you were using an older version of the Z Fold, I believe the 6 is very similar to the 5 as well in its design, and you're interested in the Z Fold 7 as someone that's been using that phone for 2 years. I think they've made some pretty significant changes that make it much better. So yeah, I'm happy with it so far, but we'll see how the durability goes because, as I said, the previous phone, back glass plate started to peel off, few issues with the inside screen protector. The actual screen I was expecting to break at some point, like just from unfolding it, maybe some dirt would get in there or whatever, and the screen would just fail because I'd seen people with older Z Folds that had failed via those different methods. I don't use a case on my phone at all, so I always just use it as normal. And so I thought that would break. Hasn't broke after 2 years, but now I've got a new phone to test for the next couple of years, see whether that breaks. So it's thinner, so you never know. Maybe it's less durable. We'll find out. I'll just end up in 2 years spending another $2,000 on a phone. So
yeah, well, my phone's at least 4 years old now. I would say
that seems like a good normal amount of time.
Yeah, well, it's still going fine. I have no issues with it. I have no plans to upgrade it. I can't remember exactly which Galaxy. It's one of the the pluses or ultras, one of the flagship ones, but yeah, it might be the 20 or something. I don't know how old that is now, what year that was released, but I'd say the one I've got is at least 4 years old now. But yeah,
there's just no reason to upgrade unless there's obviously talking about form factor changes. That's the reason to upgrade. If the phone looked the same, I wouldn't have bought it. Like if it was the exact same form factor, yeah, my phone was sort of falling apart to some degree, but I would have just waited another year. I would have waited until it broke and then bought one at that point. So yeah, there's just nothing. Like I feel for the people who had to make phone content because obviously we have to make PC hardware content, which does, we talk about performance improvements and stuff, but like phone content, the phone is faster at doing the Twitter or whatever, or loading a website. Nice.
Yeah, I feel like people who are into phones, though, the smallest, slightest change just creates a lot of hype and excitement. I don't know.
That could be. Yeah, I guess there's people use their cameras for a lot of important stuff. I usually just take photos of stupid things on my phone, like irrelevant stuff, not important life events or anything. So I guess people might be interested in that. And then mobile gaming is a thing. So I'm guessing if you do a lot of mobile gaming, performance and battery life and efficiency improvements would actually make a difference to the gaming experience where you often, I remember back in the day when I used to play phone games, didn't used to run very well. Don't know what the case is now because I don't really do that anymore, but it was interesting back then. So anyway, that's my phone update. So if people are interested, I guess I could talk more about the Z Fold 7 in a future video, but I'm expecting to get absolutely no comments about that whatsoever because I will have only interested about 3 people. So let's move on to the interesting thing that you wanted to talk about, which is, boy, we're negative a lot, aren't we? And are we wrong about that?
Well, yeah, I guess that's sort of what I've been thinking about for a while now. I don't know the best way to describe it, so I'll do my best. But I've noticed in the comments, obviously, there's people that are like, I'm sick of the negative. We're talking more about GPU coverage here because I think that's what we've been mostly negative about. The CPU stuff, motherboards, all that stuff's generally okay. There's ups and downs there, but whatever. But I think the bulk of our GPU content over the last 3 years or so has, I would say, been mostly negative.
Yep.
As as good as the NVIDIA flagships have been, your 4090s, 5090s, well, they're really the only good ones, I'd say. They're actually phenomenally good, but just stupidly expensive. So that's a negative side of that. But they're aimed for people who have kind of solved the money problem, don't care about money, so they'll just spend 7,000 Australian dollars on a GPU or whatever. So, because that's how much the 5090s. I think you can get them for maybe $5,000 now.
Big difference there. Ooh, that's a whole Z Fold 7 difference.
I actually don't know.
I actually think the phone was more than that.
Okay,
anyway.
Yeah, you can get them for maybe $4,500 now.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's.
I'm rushing out now. Now that you've told me it's only 4,500 and not 5,000.
4,500 is the cheapest. You can get a PNY triple fan, but there is still the Astral Liquids 5,600, so they're still pretty expensive.
Steal, I reckon on that.
Anyway,
Steal.
Getting slightly sidetracked. I don't even know where I was going with this, but basically, content over the years has been largely negative, and I believe it's been warranted. Like we're justified in the negativity of what we've been seeing from sort of top to bottom, because the entry levels stagnated. It's, 8 gigabyte graphics cards. The price goes up, but they still kind of suck. The 9060 XT 8 gigabyte, maybe there's some sort of hope there, but it's still an 8 gigabyte card. I guess we'll get to that in a minute. Then the mid range has been kind of crap. And then the high end is the only thing that's been sort of interesting. But as we just discussed, the prices have been horrific. Gone are the days of a $700 US flagship GPU. So I think we're justified in that sense. But this is what sort of triggered this whole thought. I've spoken to people who are building their first computer, or maybe their second computer, or they're new to PC gaming, right? They've come from console, or they're just getting into it for the first time, and they're a bit confused by a lot of the negativity around, just PC gaming hardware in general. They're like, well, I can spend like 3,000 Australian dollars and get you can get a pre-built from PC Case Gear for that kind of money, and plays all the games I want to play. I can have a great time with my friends. So what's the big deal? I can get a working computer and it's a good time for that money. And you're probably going to keep it for 4 years or whatever. So you're talking about maybe a 3,000 Australian dollar investment for at least 4 years before you have to pump more money into it. So you sort of get where I'm going with this. There's, I guess, there's kind of two possibly different groups of people, or at least I'm narrowing this down to two. There's the old dogs like you and I who have been closely paying attention to this stuff for well over a decade, 2 decades, or 2 decades plus in my case. And then there's people who have stepped in the last few years, maybe this year, the year before, after post-COVID people, I guess is a good way of putting it. Post-pandemic. Yep. So it's been the way it's been since then. You've had the cryptocurrency stuff and all that. And
yeah, I mean, if you're in your early 20s, that's probably early 20s years old, right? That's probably the situation you'd be in. Mm-hmm. You're spending, about that sort of money, entering the workforce, want to do some gaming. You'll be a post-pandemic buyer who sort of is in the reality of the situation today. Whereas for us, especially you, a little bit older, you remember a fair bit more GPU generations than
and I don't think going back obviously 2 decades is relevant, but if you go back certainly to the GeForce 10 series and sort of which I call sort of the golden era of PC gaming, and you look at what we got there and then what we're getting today, but it's different circumstances. But just to give some context, for $3,000 or it's $3,100 at PC Case Gear, you can get the PC Case Gear Dawn 9070 XT gaming PC. It's actually a ripper of a PC. So you get a Ryzen 7 7800X3D. You do get a bit of a crap motherboard. You get a cooler, which is fine. You get a 9070 XT Prime, which is fine. 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000. That's good. 2 terabyte Gen 4 SSD. 750 watt power supply in a Fantex Evolve Series S2 case, which is a really nice case. And then you get Windows installed and all that stuff. So it's a ready to go PC for basically $3,000. And that's a very capable gaming PC. So if you look at it, I mean, 3,000 Australian dollars is not nothing. But if you're buying a high-end PC that can do PC things plus high-end gaming, and you very likely won't have to do anything to that thing for at least the next 3 years. You're talking about, $1,000 a year investment for something you could realistically use for multiple hours every single day of the year. When you compare that to what other things you could do over a 3-year period, there's not too many things that could provide you with that much of a service, that much entertainment for such little money. How many times can you go to the cinemas for that kind of money over a 3-year period?
Yeah, and you're talking about a high-end PC as well. A more entry to mainstream build for $1,900 Australian, 7600X Ryzen 5 processor. They've got the Radeon RX 9060 XT 16 gigabytes. They're not even trying to, scam you with the 8 gigabyte card there, 32 gig memory, 1 terabyte SSD. That's for $1,900 Australian dollars, which is about just over twice what it would cost you to buy like a PS5 Pro locally. So like that's your step up from a console into the PC gaming sort of thing. You want to move into the PC gaming for the first time sort of build. That doesn't seem bad. Like that just seems like a perfectly reasonable PC. I don't know what that would be in US dollars, somewhere around, it would be $1,000 to $1,500, whatever the comparison, $1,200, $1,300 US sort of thing, somewhere around there seems, pretty reasonable. So yeah, I sort of get where you're coming from with this discussion, right? Like the GPU reviews are so negative, but then we're looking at an actual PC that people are buying, and is that bad? That's sort of, I'm guessing that's sort of where you are coming from, right?
Yeah. That's essentially what I'm trying to get at, is that if you're stepping into PC gaming right now for the first time, how unreasonable does the current landscape appear? Like, we're talking, we're talking for most regions, but let's say Australia, the US, like I think it's pretty similar to cost of living and what you get and all that. But I mean, I remember saving up for my first PC way back when I was in high school, and it was about $1,500. And we're talking pretty close to, definitely 20 plus years ago now. So it's only doubled in that time. Basically, I'm conflicted about all of this, right? Because we have seen the stagnation, like it is real. But also, I don't know. I'm not sure about this one, Tim. I don't know. I get where people who are coming into it.
Yeah, no, I think I do agree with you to some extent, because, or at least not that you're fully in favor of this point.
I don't know what my point is. I'm basically just seeing the two sides, right? Yeah. And I'm trying to work. I see the valid arguments on both sides of this, and I'm trying to work it all together. Because I obviously don't want to start being like, guys, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing to see here. Just spend the money. It's fine. I think what it boils down to is the fact that we have got this VRAM issue, and it is a real issue now. And if, the 9060 XT was a 16 gigabyte card and the 5060 Ti was a 16 gigabyte card at the 8 gigabyte prices, because I think that's really what they need to target, or closer to, I think it'd be a lot better. And if like the 5070 was a 16 gigabyte card, I think that would be a lot better as well. I think that's one of my main criticisms, because you look at the 9060 XT for the money, and there's even some that are below MSRP now, and it's pretty solid performance. But the 8 gigabyte thing for me is a big problem. Realistically, you should have more VRAM than a half-decade-old console. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah. I think that is one aspect to it. I guess the sort of counter argument to this is, low-end GPUs or lower-end GPUs have always become obsolete more quickly than higher-end GPUs. So is it a situation where today lower-end cards are becoming more obsolete more quickly because of this issue? Or was it back, let's say a decade ago, were those cards becoming more obsolete because of the actual performance of the graphics card? Because I think a 5060/5060 Ti 9060 XT sort of product is probably relatively more, like considering the games of the time, is probably relatively more powerful than you would have seen from entry-level cards a decade ago.
I'm not sure I agree with that, because I feel like entry-level cards did historically age really well, arguably better than flagship cards, in the sense that, and this is why I've never liked the mindset of spend way more money or more money than you intend to because it'll last longer. But really, you're better off spending less money and upgrading more often, at least historically, when we're getting good performance gains on a regular basis. That's probably less so now. But you look at like RX 580 type products, and they just never died, had enough VRAM. And when you buy an RX 580, you're not buying the world's most powerful graphics card, but it's still quite capable when you buy it. And then because you didn't spend, much over $200 US, 3-4 years down the track, you're happy to dial down the quality settings to keep the thing alive. Whereas if you buy these cards now, you're really having to dial down the quality settings, especially in the latest and greatest games, quite substantially to get them just playable purely because of the VRAM. And if you're doing that, if you're having to make those compromises now, in the 3 to 4 years down the track, it's going to be a nightmare. Whereas you didn't have to do that with an RX 580. And then while the flagship cards certainly have more legs in them because they're more powerful to begin with and typically have more VRAM and more of everything, nobody ever buys a top tier flagship GPU and goes, I'm going to use this for 5 years because it's I mean, I know somebody does it, but most people don't do this, right? They buy a flagship GPU because they want top tier performance. They want the best of the best. So they buy that, and then they're more likely, and we certainly see this at the high end, to just upgrade for 10% more performance, like start all over again. Like how many people that bought a 4090 have tried to buy or have bought now a 5090? Certainly a lot more people relative to 4060 owners buying 5060s, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I was just sort of looking back over some of your reviews just to sort of see the position of products like the RX 480 when it launched. It's whether or not it supports my argument, I guess, depends on your position of how good this level of performance is. But first of all, we should establish that a $300 GPU today is equivalent to sort of around a $220 GPU in 2016, which is when the RX 480 launched. And in sort of the intensive titles at the time, the RX 480 8GB was delivering, say, 50 FPS in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt at 1440p. You sort of flick through to like Star Wars Battlefront, about 50 FPS using ultra settings at 1440p. You're getting about 80 FPS at 1080p in that title. You got Rise of the Tomb Raider, which was the Tomb Raider game at the time. We're going back a while now, right? Again, about 50 FPS at 1440p, very high settings. So, the performance of that card isn't great, but it's probably similar to what like what is a 5060 doing in sort of today's highest end titles at 1440p.
The big difference there as well, though, is that with a 5080, all you had to worry about was the compute performance of the GPU.
So RX you had 480. Yeah.
Sorry, what did I say?
I think you said an RX 5080.
I meant 580.
580.
Sorry. You really just had to worry about, shadow quality and stuff like that to get to the performance level you wanted. You didn't have to worry about, did the game fit inside the VRAM? Like, was it the GPU that was crippling performance, or the GPU that was the weak point, or was it your VRAM? The VRAM was never a consideration, especially if you had the 8GB model. It just, that worked. You just had to dial, like you had to use like the Harbor Unboxed optimize, settings to get the best performance. And then you could typically just whack textures up to max, so you could enjoy high quality textures and stuff like that. Whereas with an RTX 5060, you've got to work out, is the GPU holding me back here, or is it the VRAM that's causing the stuttering? Like, do I have to lower texture quality to fit the game within the VRAM? And without having like a 16GB card to work that out, it's actually quite difficult to know what's causing the problems, because sure, you can monitor VRAM usage, but often and this is the mistake a lot of people make with these cards, is it will be well under it can be well under what the, you think the cap is on an 8GB card. Like it could be at 6.5 GB, for example, because it's having to fit other things in there, and it doesn't necessarily get to like 7.9 GB, for example, and then stop working in a lot of examples. So it's really hard to know if it's the VRAM or not. Like the game, I guess you can monitor system memory, but even then, without a card with more VRAM, it's difficult to know, does the game just use a lot of RAM? So when you've only got that one data point, that one reference point, it is hard to know what's causing the horrific performance. And then you've got to mess around. You can go down to low quality settings and you'll see VRAM dip, and then performance and stuttering improves. So anyway, it's just, it's another variable that makes it more difficult.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been that variance back with the RX 480 days where
No.
you reviewed the 8 gigabyte card when it came out. There was a 4 gig model. 4 gig cards were standard at that time. But even in your charts, like 4 gigabyte cards were, for the most part, running
that's
the highest end cards of the highest end games of that time, which are some of the titles I was just mentioning, perfectly fine, which is different to today because, well, actually, there's a number of different things here. So this gets quite complicated, right? Because firstly, while on average, your average 1440p data for the RTX 5060 has it at 55 FPS at 1440p across an 18 game sample, which is similar to the performance of an RX 480 in the tough titles of the time. There are games which run quite a bit worse on a product like a 5060. Star Wars Outlaws Ultra 1440p is like 30 FPS. So part of this discussion is, well, upscaling is doing some of that job now that previously actual hardware used to give you for native performance. And then secondly is the performance is so much more variable now on an entry-level card because of the VRAM issues. So back then with the 480 or whatever, yeah, a couple of games, the performance isn't going to be great. You're probably going to run into issues in a couple of years after that card for the latest and greatest high-end game titles that are coming out. But there weren't going to be that many surprises, if you know what I mean. Like, yeah, The Witcher 3 runs at 50 FPS, but then the next game that comes out is probably going to be 45 FPS, then 40 FPS. So a real slow degradation of performance over time, in which case, if you just avoided those games or just...
Well, you just lower the quality settings, right? Which is what you would do. It's the argument for the 8 gigabyte card as well, but you're doing that down the track and you're not having to lower, again, texture quality. You can keep that up, which really enhances the visuals of the game.
Yeah, and some games come out, you tested Doom back then. Doom 2016 was getting over 60 FPS. So just some games aren't going to be at that floor of performance. But with the current cards that you're getting, yes, you're going to get a game that runs just fine at 60 FPS at 1440p, which is, again, we're using the exact same resolution as the comparisons of the 480 from 2016, right? Some games will run it fine, but then, yeah, there'll just be games where it's like, just doesn't work, like Stalker 2, epic settings or something like that, just doesn't run at all, or missing textures, missing quality of the game itself, the visual quality, which is, yeah, just that is a degradation. But then I guess where these people are coming from is they didn't experience the RX 480 era. So they're just coming in now and, okay, so the 8 gigabyte model kind of sucks. I guess I have to spend $100 more to get, a 16 gigabyte 5060 Ti or 9060 XT. Maybe that's just the thing that's done these days. Maybe, especially if you're building a whole system, what you were talking about before, spending 2,000, 3,000 Australian dollars, spending an extra $100 to get the VRAM that actually makes you able to play games. Maybe that doesn't sound so bad to someone that's just come into PC gaming for the first time compared to us old folk, where we can clearly remember the times when, the entry-level cards offered you more. And then, on top of that discussion as well, the RX 580 wasn't even the lowest end card in the lineup. There was like the 570, the 560, I think there was a 550 from AMD, the 1060, 6 gig, then 3 gig, then the 1050 Ti, 1050, 1030. So it kept going down the stack more. Today, it's the 5060, 5050, that's it. So it's just... And yeah, I'm sure back in the day, the GT 1030 and GTX 1050 didn't run games very well and were limited straight out of the gate on some of those situations. I think there was like a 2 gig model of the 1050 and stuff. So those would have been problematic back then. But today, the floor has raised so far that there's no longer these complaints about $100 products. We're now complaining about $300 products. And I think that's very different. So I guess people don't realize that, when I bought my first PC, I think I only spent for just the PC itself somewhere in the range of maybe $700 Australian, which is sort of like the floor of what you could get for like, I think I bought like some Radeon card, sort of entry to mid-level, entry-level CPU. I think I had like a Core 2 Duo back then, overclock the crap out of that thing to gain extra performance. And my whole system was just very cheap. So...
yeah, it probably was more expensive when I first got into it, and then we had it become more affordable.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember saving up $1,500 and I got like a Voodoo Banshee, which wasn't even like nowhere near the best graphics card at the time. I think it was 16 megabytes, but it was AGP. So,
and graphics cards got superseded very quickly in the early 2000s when they were sort of adding major graphical features with each architecture, which meant that the games would come out that just wouldn't run on the old architecture at all. Like you can't load the game. That was a big issue back then. Then there was this period of time, which I think is this golden era that we're trying to get back to, where low-end graphics cards were affordable. There was a lot of competition. PC gaming was sort of growing as this viable console alternative, that you could do all the sorts of things that consoles can't do. And then another factor, of course, is that consoles are just better now than they were back then when they were largely 30 FPS, relatively low resolution experiences. Today, a PS5 can run a lot of games at a nice 60 FPS, which isn't going to be ideal for people playing multiplayer games. But if you're firing up a single player title at 60 FPS, some sort of, 4K with upscaling sort of output from a PS5, that also makes, these lower end PCs, I guess, seem like worse value comparatively than back in the day when you could, spend $1,000 and get a much better computer than a PS4 or whatever. Now that gap has sort of shrunk a bit as well, I think.
Yep, definitely. Yes, there's a couple of things going on, especially with the reviews, because it depends on what reference point or what you prioritize to sort of gauge the success of a product. So it's immediate competition for that generation. And with AMD sort of, I mean, they've probably been a bit more aggressive. Well, they've definitely been more aggressive this generation than past generations. Past generations, it's sort of been no real competition. So that hasn't been a great measuring stick. And then if you look at the previous generation product, so, comparing a 5060 with a 4060, so you can make those comparisons, and they used to be more favorable because we used to get more of a gen-on-gen improvement. So in a lot of instances, those comparisons have also been disappointing. So then it becomes, how far back do we have to start looking to recommend this product as a viable upgrade? So you start going, okay, so if you have like a 3060, or maybe that's a bad example because that had 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but like the 5060, the VRAM issue, sort of ignoring that, that's a pretty good performance upgrade. So if you're coming back from there, you get a reasonable upgrade. Then certainly if we're talking, 2060 owners, then, going to a 5060, you are getting quite a substantial performance upgrade. Though you'd probably recommend like a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte, and then it starts getting really expensive. So there's sort of those three things. And then the fourth thing that we're now introducing is, well, I just want to buy a computer now. Like, I don't care about all the nonsense that came before it. That's not relevant to me. I just want to buy a thing now. What thing should I buy? And when the reviews are focusing so much on like, what does this offer over the previous generations? And I mean, look, the review answers all of these questions, especially once the competing parts are out, because you're comparing, an RTX 5060 Ti with an RX 9060 XT, and then you're comparing it with similar, tier GPUs from a few generations ago. So sort of all the answers are there. It just depends on which one of those angles or how many of those angles the review touches on. So that's, where it becomes a bit complicated.
I think the one thing that these people are probably, the new to PC gaming commenters are sort of seeing as lacking from the reviews, and something that isn't touched on too often, because I've always thought a review is at its strongest when it is comparisons to other products. You want to know product A versus product B, which is better. But a lot of what it's ignored is the product good or bad? And I mean from just a more general standpoint. Like, is a 9060 XT and 5060 Ti a bad product? Like, does it not run games at an acceptable quality or performance level? And I think that's where a lot of people are sort of going, well, and there'll be a video coming up on the channel probably the day after this video goes live, where I've tested the 5060 Ti and 9060 XT 16 gigabyte GPUs with upscaling enabled to compare the upscaling performance of the cards. And, if you've seen your review, which largely tested native performance, and there's native testing this upcoming video as well, the native numbers are not amazing. Like there's a lot of 1440p ultra type configurations where native performance is sort of in the 40 to 50 FPS range. But then with DLSS4, FSR4 upscaling, there's a lot of games that run 70, 80 FPS. We're talking modern releases because I've tested games that use DLSS4 and FSR4. Modern releases, reasonable performance. And I think for single player titles, if you're getting around that 70 to 80 FPS with upscaling, modern upscaling works quite well at 1440p. Like, is that's a good experience from a product that costs for the 9060 XT $350?
Mm-hmm.
And so, is it bad that like a person buying, this PC Case Gear Phantom 9060 XT gaming PC for 1,900 Australian dollars, they're getting a system that is playing games 1440p, still a very popular resolution, great affordable monitors, decent experience. The system looks nice. So, back in the day, if you bought a pre-built, the cases were like very ugly, no RGB. This has got all your RGB, glass side panel, looks good. It's playing games at acceptable frame rates. You're not dealing with 40, 30 FPS. You're getting a good experience. And that's from a relatively mainstream entry-level product that isn't awfully priced. Now, yeah, maybe if you look 10 years ago, you could have got that for a lot lower price, relative to the games of the time, et cetera. You would have been playing at about the same quality levels, about the same performance for less money. But I think if someone had just building their first PC, they bought a 5060 Ti or 9060 XT, 16 gig, so they're not running into the issues, they'd be playing games and going, yeah, this is great. Like, I tested some games with like very high preset plus ray tracing, and it still worked reasonably well. And you could easily turn that down to high, get even more performance. So I guess part of that then goes into, are high-end cards now catering to an audience that a lot of people aren't? Like, if you're not playing games at 4K with path tracing, and you don't want 120 FPS at 4K, then there's no point buying or even complaining about the price or tiering of something like a 5090, because those are features and performance you wouldn't necessarily need or use for the setup that you're sort of targeting. And it would be great to get 4K 120 FPS for an affordable price. Obviously, the price isn't great and so on and so forth. But if you can get 1440p ultra 60 FPS experience for a reasonable sort of price point, it's not as disastrous as it probably was maybe the previous generation or so, when those had stagnated. We didn't get any sort of performance uplift, and you probably weren't able to target 1440p 60 FPS to the same level, especially on an AMD GPU where you would have been using FSR3 upscaling, not FSR4, which obviously looks quite a bit different. So that's sort of another one of the angles that I'd be thinking about with sort of like, back in the 1080 Ti era, if you wanted the flagship, the best performance, high refresh rate, 1440p experience, you needed to spend the $700 on a 1080 Ti to get the best of the best. These days, if you don't have the highest end monitors and that sort of thing, you don't actually need a 5090 to get a really good gaming experience.
Again, I think the 16 gigabyte versions of those cards is really good. So you won't have seen it yet, but people watching this podcast potentially have seen it. I've done like a best worst 8 gigabyte video that is probably being uploaded as we speak. And I included obviously the 8 gigabyte versions of the 9060 XT and 5060 Ti running a few different PCI Express configurations, and showed some side-by-side footage, and then compared the 16 gigabyte models to that. And the idea of that testing was to target games and test conditions that exceeded 8 gigabyte cards. So I only tested 6 games, but I think we've got probably 30 examples we can point to at this point in time where you can cripple an 8 gigabyte card while the 16 gigabyte card is still highly playable. And one of the things I noticed in that content was just how good value the 9060 XT 16 gigabyte is in the current market, just relative to the 5060 Ti, which I think the pricing, especially here in Australia, is quite crazy, the difference.
There's like a 30 to 40% difference.
It's pretty crazy. And then the 9060 XT 8 gigabyte, I'm so torn on this product because I hate it because it's got 8 gigabytes of VRAM and it also shares the same name as the 16 gigabyte card. So I do hate it. But compared to the RTX 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte, it's now the emphasis here is compared to the RTX 5060 Ti. It's like a good product. I almost
let's clip that.
I almost
clip that. Remove the context.
Like it's good. It's good value relative to the RTX 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte because it's first of all much cheaper and much better performance, and it avoids more of the VRAM related issues because of those 16 PCI Express lanes opposed to just 8. Now, it doesn't avoid them entirely, of course, but it does help in a few examples, which I showed in that video. And the big thing working in its favor is the discount. So we've seen some instances where the 9060 XT 8 gigabyte has got down to like $260 US. People have bought them for that price. So I'm really torn on that part because I really do loathe the whole 8 gigabyte VRAM thing in 2025. And I strongly feel like it is damaging to PC gaming, having, less VRAM than half-decade-old consoles. I think is really hurting PC gaming, really causing things to lag behind, game optimization, all of those problems. I really think 12 gigabytes should be the absolute minimum, if not 16 in 2025. So to recommend or say that an 8 gigabyte card is good is tough, but it is cheap. And people do need affordable products. And like to give you an example here in Australia, you can buy the 8 gigabyte 9060 XT. It's a Power Color Reaper model for $500 at PCK Skier. So I'm just looking at one retailer here. It's one of our biggest. 500 Australian dollars. Now, the 8 gigabyte 5060 Ti is $660. So it's an extra $160. And it's slower and not as good. And if you want the 16 gigabyte 5060 Ti, which is a good product, and I really like it, but it's too expensive, that's 760 Australian dollars.
Yeah, so, and it's cheaper than the 5060 non-Ti model.
Now, I will say that I still think the 8 gigabyte card sucks and you shouldn't buy it. That is ultimately my recommendation is you shouldn't buy the 9060 XT, and especially here in Australia because the 16 gigabyte Reaper is only $80 Australian more. And what's wild about that is you can buy the Power Color RX 9060 XT Reaper 16 gigabyte for 580 Australian dollars, whereas the 5060 Ti, the cheapest 8 gigabyte card, is $660. Who the hell's buying an RTX 5060 Ti here in Australia?
It makes no sense.
So,
and honestly, neither does the 5060 because the 9060 XT 8 gigabyte is significantly more powerful and cheaper.
Yeah.
So,
you're looking at a 31% premium to buy a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte over a 9060 XT 16 gigabyte. So, given that, I think it's very reasonable to say that the 9060 XT 16 gigabyte is the card to recommend and the card to get for a more budget-oriented builder, right? Like it's not crazy to say that. That's the card you should be getting.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the sort of what we're talking about where gamers who are just coming into the ecosystem now building PCs or whatever, there's another element to this of that could apply to people at certain budgets, right? So if you have only a certain amount of money and you cannot exceed that for whatever reason, you're not willing to save up to get the cards that we deem to be good, then you're stuck in this situation where you're going to have to purchase an 8 gigabyte graphics card. So it gets to that point, right? Your budget's too limited. You're just going to have to do it. And so what's ignored in a lot of the 8 gigabyte card reviews is, again, like if you're in that situation, is the card good or bad? Is it, what's the value like? Because, you look at your reviews, the 5050, for example, we put the card in the thumbnail on top of a pile of trash. The 5060, you didn't like that card very much. And a lot of the 8 gig content is focused largely on those VRAM comparisons, showing how bad it is relative to the 16 gig model. But then if you're a gamer who plays specific types of games and uses specific types of quality settings, it still does work. You just have to avoid the situations where it doesn't work. so that's the qualifier where, yes, of course there's issues with that product, right? We're not shying away from the issues, but for someone who does want to buy an entry-level graphics card, doesn't have the money to go any higher, they're building it because it's cheap, you can still play a lot of games on an 8 gigabyte graphics card using some quality settings. And the 5060 and especially the 9060 XT 8 gigabyte, if you can avoid the VRAM issues, is quite a powerful graphics card for that price. You've shown it to be faster than an RTX 3070, which 5 years ago had a few issues with some games with 8 gigabyte, but played a lot of other games quite well.
I get what you're saying, and I agree. Like, money's not something that grows on trees. You just can't necessarily come up with more money, but at the same time, while I'm saying that, I would encourage you to save up. I know it's easy to say, we'll just save up, make more money, but we're not talking about like, a car that's $1,000 and one that's $10,000. Like, the $10,000 one just is not achievable for someone, like spending 10 times more, right? We're not talking about that though. Here in Australia, as I said, the 9060 XT starts at $500 for the 8 gig card. It's $580 for the 16 gigabyte card. $80. You're keeping this product, and I'm not trying to trivialize $80, but like realistically, if someone's buying a 9060 XT and they really are tight on money, how long are they hoping that product will last them? Like, the answer is, based on the polling data, is at least 4 years. From all the polling data we've done over the years with tens of thousands of people. And so you agree with that, Tim? 4 years?
Most people upgrade every 3 to 4 generations, I think. They don't upgrade after one. That's very unlikely.
Yeah.
So 4 to 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, 4 years minimum is what I'm going with there. So let's just, if you're going with that, you're talking about 80 Australian dollars for a 4-year investment. And like, I can't show you 4 years from now, but I think we all know in 4 years from now how an 8 gigabyte card and a 16 gigabyte card is going to compare. And it's not even a situation where, well, you just turn down the quality settings. It's going to be very difficult to play a lot of the new games on an 8 gigabyte card. It'll be like trying to do it on a 4 gigabyte card today. The compromise is like, there is just going to be just such a difference between the 8 and 16 gigabyte versions of these two cards. And even in the US. So there's the XFX Swift model, $300 US right now in stock for the 8 gigabyte card, or $360. It's only $10 over MSRP for the 16 gigabyte model. It's $60 US for an investment that is going to last at least 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I was largely playing devil's advocate, to be fair. Like, I would definitely recommend people buy the 16 gig card. I was just thinking more about the angle of, are we being too negative? I think for those entry, it's difficult, right? I think for the 16 gig cards and even products like the 5070 and so on, which do largely play a lot of games just fine, if you're buying a PC for the first time and you do buy from that level up, you're going to be left with a pretty good gaming experience, even if we're saying things in reviews like it doesn't compare well to the previous generation, or, times were so good a decade ago. Look at what we've got now. We've got a 5070 with 12 gig of VRAM. How bad's that compared to consoles, blah, 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 right? 5070 still runs games quite well, is a decent, you're getting a decent mid-tier experience from that product. With the lower tier products, it is different because, yes, you probably should be saving the money and just buying what is clearly a far superior product for a little bit more, which makes a lot more sense. It's hard though, right? Because if you're coming from like an RTX 3050 and you're like, I'm upgrading to an RTX 5060 8 gigabyte, it is massively faster. And if you do avoid those situations where VRAM is a problem, it's not like it's the same, it's not like it's stagnated horribly and it's giving you the exact same performance. it's better. You just should have bought something even slightly better than, or slightly more expensive than that again.
Yeah, and even the 5070 thing, it's like tough because you're talking about a 12 gigabyte card that, it's perfectly fine now for the vast majority of scenarios. You can break it for sure. But again, you're going to want to keep, even a 5070, I would say someone's going to want to keep that card for at least 4 years, and you're not going to want to heavily compromise on quality settings. Now, I'm not as convinced that that will be a huge problem in 4 years on a 5070 with 12 gigs of VRAM. But it's the cheapest model right now on Newegg is $580 US. So it's like not a cheap product.
Well, what are you suggesting there, though? Like someone go up to a 5070 Ti? Though?
No. I'm just complaining about how it all sucks. Well, I would probably look at a Radeon alternative, to be honest, like an RX 9070 or something like that. I don't know what they are.
Oh yeah, sure. But if you play games where you'll be using FSR 3 instead of DLSS 3, I could understand why someone wouldn't want to do that.
Sure.
Like I'm not saying that's not, what decision would I personally make? I play a lot of modern games, so I'm more likely to run into an FSR4 situation, in which case 9070 is perfectly fine. If you're playing a lot of older titles, which don't support it at all.
Well, I agree. I think the 5070 is perfectly fine. So I think if you bought one, you'd largely be happy with it. You'd be okay with it. But I'm just saying, like, in the full broader context, it's kind of an underwhelming product. But
yeah, it is. But then again, people have said in comments, like, you're so negative about a 5070. Right. I bought one and it's fine, right? Which we're sort of trying to reconcile with, right?
That's right. So it's difficult because you've kind of got to get to the conclusion and be like, okay, so if you're new to PC gaming and you have no other experience, you just want to buy a card, does this work and will you have a good time with it? Yes and yes. It works and you're probably going to have a good time, and you're probably going to have a good time for the foreseeable future. So it ticks that box, whereas the 8 gigabyte cards, I would say, wouldn't. But then, have you been PC gaming for 5 years? Are you looking for an upgrade? Who was this exciting for? And you go back, RTX 4070, not so much. 3070, it starts to get quite a substantial performance upgrade there. You're not spending too much more money than you probably would have, and you get an extra 4 gigabytes of VRAM. So that's where it starts to become like a viable option. And then certainly from like an RTX 2070, you're getting a much more performant product. So that's great. So anyway, like I said, and then you've got the other angle, like, so how does this compare to the competition? And there's a few different conclusions and ways you can look at these things.
I guess in your opinion, if someone was buying a brand new, like getting into PC gaming for the first time today, are they in a better position than during the 40 series, the direct previous generation? So instead of someone buying a 5060 Ti, whatever today, they previously would have had to buy a 4060 Ti. Are they better off today in terms of that first time buying experience, the performance of the cards, everything?
I think generally, yes. Not just because of the GPUs. I think CPUs are probably in a better position as well. Like AM5's gotten cheaper, more motherboards, better availability.
That's true.
DDR5's become much more affordable. I think you can get like really good DDR5 memory kits now, like 32 gigabyte kits for like low latency for $80, $90 probably tops.
NVIDIA sold an $800 GPU with 12 gigabytes of VRAM last time.
Yeah, the 40 series was real bad. And I guess that's what makes the 50 series very disappointing, is the fact that the 40 series bar you thought was set really low. And it hasn't been well exceeded, I guess. So
yeah, it's been largely the AMD competition, really, hasn't it? Because in the previous generation, if you wanted a 16 gig graphics card for as cheap as possible previously, that was like $500 5060 Ti for a bit. Then it went down to $450. And then AMD, late to the party, eventually released the 7600 XT for $330 or whatever. Now they've launched a more powerful quite a bit more powerful version, 9060 XT 16 gigabyte for $350. So I think that's a better position for that entry point gamer than you would have got previously, where a lot of people were spending, $400 on 4060 Ti 8 gigabytes or well, people are still spending $300 on 8 gig cards with the 5060 and 4060, right? But it's at least now you can spend a little bit more to get a 16 gig card that actually works quite well. Whereas back then it was, very different, especially if you stuck more towards the NVIDIA side of things. So it probably is better from that sense now. But again, like part of the job as reviewers is, we have to understand that position and that point. But if we ham that up too much, like talk about how great it is that we've got these products now, we're reporting on things from a consumer's perspective, so what the experiences consumers would get, but we're also holding to account the companies that are making these products. And so if we're going down that consumer line of thinking of, well, it's what you're getting now for entry point to PC gaming is fine, but we're ignoring the whole comparison to previous products and products being good or bad on their own merits and that sort of thing, it's not holding up the bargain of holding the companies to account as much, which is still very important because we need to hold them to account for things that they advertise incorrectly and when they make comparisons that are not correct. And we want to show where the products actually stand, what they're doing compared to their competitors based on independent testing. So there's a lot of different priorities that go into that content. So it being negative is a product of trying to do that side of things as well.
Yep. I think AMD's done a great job, especially with like the Radeon 9060 XT being, the competition being 30% more expensive and being no faster in terms of performance, maybe a bit better at ray tracing, but that's not super relevant, I don't think, for a 5060 Ti, but, let me know what you think, I guess, in the comments. But they've done really well with that product. I think what undermined that product and sort of spoiled the launch a bit was the 8GB version having the same name. We've talked about it at length. I just think if that was the Radeon RX 9060 or something like that, then it would have been a much better situation. But copying the mistakes of NVIDIA and then releasing two versions of the 9060 XT, and one, in my opinion, being woefully inadequate, heavily compromised, and just a trap for gamers, which again we've talked about at length, just spoilt that, sort of like put a bad taste in your mouth for that product. And even though it is quite a good value, we've seen pricing settle now. We've seen there's good availability on these products, and I would recommend if someone wants a good entry level GPU, they buy a 16GB 9060 XT. Like it's significantly better value than a 5060 Ti 16GB. I guess the availability and pricing of the 9070 XT made people hesitant on the 9060 XT, how it's going to play out. And then just, the two products with the very different VRAM configurations is what spoiled that one for me.
Yeah, I agree. Launch things and launching into a market where people don't have high expectations anymore because of the pricing situation kind of does sour it a bit when everything you're seeing is so ridiculously expensive and inflated. And then you're saying, oh, there's a new GPU launching. Oh, awesome. I'm super hyped for that. It turns out it actually has been available at a reasonable price. So changes that discussion a bit. But like those are things that you can't really predict at the time. So again, if you're making a review and you're sort of saying, well, all the GPUs before this have been advertised at a certain price and then the actual price has been a lot higher, you can understand how reviews would sort of factor that in and be like, well, we'll have to wait and see on this one. You're not going to get that, full hype scenario where, oh my God, they're actually available for $350. Go, that's awesome.
Yep. And just to add a bit more, before when I was really struggling to say that the 8GB 9060 XT is good value, the full context of that is at a discounted price. So again, to reiterate, I think at the current prices in Australia and the US, which was, what was it, 60 US to 80 Australian dollar difference?
Yeah.
Bad. The 8GB card's bad. Do not buy under any circumstances. But we had seen some closer to 250 US pricing for the 8GB cards here and there. And I think that's when it starts to become good. And the context of that is it's a 31% discount over the 16GB model. So it's the kind of discount you're getting from GeForce to Radeon. So if the 8GB 9060 XT is 30% or more cheaper than the 16GB model, that's when it becomes like a viable option. I wouldn't hold it against you for buying it because that's quite a substantial saving.
Yeah, that goes back to what we were saying in last week's podcast. We were talking about them, potentially launching another entry-level GPU. And I think I came to the conclusion that they should just make the 9060 XT cheaper, the 8GB model, because other options potentially aren't economically viable. And potentially even in that price at $250, it's not economically viable. They should just make more 16 gig cards.
Well, yeah, that's right. So here in Australia, the 8GB card is currently 14% cheaper than the 16GB card. I'm saying it needs to be more than double that. And at the moment, it's 500 Australian dollars. If you could get a 9060 XT 8GB card for $400, then I think that's a viable option and worth considering. I still think that they shouldn't be selling 8GB mainstream GPUs, discrete GPUs in 2025, because it hurts PC gaming and all of that. But given the current market and everything that's available and the pricing structure of everything, if you can get the 8GB models at a 30% discount, then, that's what if you want to save every last dollar and, get the most bang for your buck and be aware of the compromises that might need to be made or will need to be made in circumstances, then sure, get the 8GB card.
Yeah.
But at present, for like a 13-14% discount, they just don't make sense. And I would save up the extra 60 US or 80 Australian dollars and just get the 16GB version.
Yeah, I mean, at those prices that you were suggesting, it's not like it's a completely non-functional product. It's one of those functional with caveats and things that you have to be aware of sort of products. And if you fit into that category where what you're going to be doing with it is going to be functional on that card and the price makes sense because obviously at the moment you would just spend more, then that's when you'd hit the trigger to recommend it. But we're just not in that position right now, which goes back to everything you're saying about the advertising of the cards, the $50 price difference, the launch. If the positioning that we're talking now was the launch situation, it would have been very different. But All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. And I think you've got some interesting news to talk about, which isn't the boring life stuff, but it's boring anyway. Let's get into the boring life section. All right, Steve, we're back. Hit us with your boring, but actually I know what you're going to talk about, not boring story.
Yeah, so just before I jump into that, I've been furiously building Zoe's room, so we should have a video on that in the next week or so. That's been taking up a lot of my time as well, but that's going well, so I'm excited about that. Happy to get it done and whatever, so there will be some content on that. I've decided to make a video. But yeah, I've been building away. That's going well. So that's been most of my life. I've been benchmarking, doing the normal work, and every second I've had free, I've been on the tools renovating her room. So it's going well. A little bit stressful, time management and whatnot, but we're getting there. So that's that. Big updates here. Big news. And he's not here at the moment. He has actually left. But Balin has finally, after 7 months, got his Volkswagen Arteon back, and he is very, very pleased.
Yay!
So, yay!
Nice.
And it's crazy. It came, well, first of all, it's crazy because his car got smashed into and broken into last year, and RACV, honored the insurance and said, yeah, we'll get it repaired. They took it to a repair shop, and it took 7 months to get all the parts and everything and fix it. So that's crazy. Obviously, I've been updating you guys here and there about it. When I first told you about it, which was probably about 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago now, I was expecting it to be back within weeks. It just kept dragging on for various different reasons. Balin had a hire car through the insurer for that entire time. So I think the insurer had to spend about $18,000 on the hire car for Balin while his car was getting fixed because, it took 7 months. So I don't know how much it actually cost to fix his car and whatnot, but that's an insane amount of money. Clearly, if they had the time again, well, I think if they had the time again, they would do it differently, knowing how this all played out. But basically, none of it was the fault of Balin. Like the initial incident, the repair time, the repair costs, he was at no fault for any of it. He was just the victim of the whole thing. So for those who don't know, leading up to Christmas, so I think it was early December last year, Balin and his girlfriend drove in towards the city, and they parked in one of the... Sorry, was that? Melbourne.
The city of Melbourne, just to clarify for people that don't live around here.
Well, just they drove to a city, so sure, whatever. Yeah. And we have like different brands of secure parking. I think this was like a Wilson or something. But he parked his car in what was meant to be a secure facility. They're not really super secure, but whatever. Parked in it and went and did his Christmas shopping and stuff, and they had a lovely time, came back, and the whole side of his car was smashed in. So the Arteon has like those frameless windows. I think there's 3 of them on the side of the car. So, front passenger, rear passenger, and then a quarter or something. Anyway, they decided when Balin was telling the story, Tim's comment cracked me up. So they used like a crowbar, let's say, and they smashed all the windows in, but they also hit the roof. So they dinted the roof. So that needed panel beating and whatnot. And Tim's like, oh, you think the windows would be a big enough target? They just hit those. And I won't say what I said, but anyway, it was basically they were looking for quick cash. Balin made the mistake of leaving a backpack on the back seat. And so they smashed the windows, sell the backpack and whatever, and then presumably buy drugs with it. Annoyingly, the police know or strongly suspect they have evidence of who did it. It's someone that's known to the police, and they're just like, because Balin lost about $2,000 with the stuff that was stolen out of the car, which the insurance doesn't cover, like the contents of the car.
Mm.
And the police like, if you want to try and recoup those funds or whatever, you've got to take the person to court. Like you've got to charge them. So do you want to charge them? And then it's going to cost Balin more money to try and get back what in the context of things would be a relatively small amount of money. And Balin just didn't need the headache. So he's like, you know what, I'll just claim my insurance, get the car repaired and move on with my life, which is what most people would do. So this person got away with it. They weren't charged or anything. It's just, that's just how it works. So anyway, but basically because this person decided to smash in the side of Balin's car and steal his personal possessions, he didn't have his much loved car for 7 months. And so Balin's a bit of a car guy. This is a car that he really liked. He had it for about, I don't know, maybe close to a year at the point that it got smashed. I think he might have even, about a year he'd had it for. It was in immaculate condition as well. Wasn't a mark on it. And he's got it back, and they haven't done, because like I said, it's frameless windows. They haven't put like the proper seal on the inside. So now when he goes above 50 kilometers per hour, the car whistles like unbearably loud. So now it's got to go back to the panel shop. They have to fix that. So I don't know how many ongoing visits will be before the car's actually 100% and fixed properly.
Right.
So it's just like ongoing nightmare.
He has it back, but he doesn't really have it back because they spent 7 months to fix it, and they actually didn't fix it. Just to be clear, they did not fix it.
No. So he does have the car back. So that's a step in the right direction. But it will have to go back at some point.
Low bar we're setting for the repair shop to spend 7 months on a repair and not actually finish and fix the repair. If they spent 7 months, I would be expecting the most premium of services, making sure that it's in immaculate factory condition. But no, you can't expect that anymore, can you, from these sorts of things?
No. So while he's happy to have the car back, it's not a finished story yet, let's say. So bit frustrating, a bit crazy that, just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, how much of a headache that can cause for you. So massive nightmare for Balin, but it looks like we're finally getting to the end of it. So, some good news, Tim, some good news for Balin. So like I said, he's a car guy. He's had to drive a Kia Sportivo around for 7 months. Doesn't really compare to his Arteon, let's just say. Different quality and performance vehicle there. So
it's probably much better than my car.
Well, once again, Tim, you're setting a low bar there.
Yeah, probably.
But anyway, so it's just a bit of a nightmare situation. But it was good to see him. He turned up to work in his Arteon, and big smile. He was happy. So that was good. So he's mostly happy with it. Just a few little things that need to get fixed up, and but at least the body work and all the really important stuff, the paint work and all that's really well done. Like you can't tell. Balin's been over it with like critical lighting. He's had a real good look at it. So at least they got that stuff right. So
Well,
yeah.
hopefully it's not going to be too long to get those final sort of fixes put in and back to the condition that they should have given it to him in. But, 7 months, stuff's going to go by the way. So I think he was telling me the other day that when he got it back, there was like leaves and stuff inside because it was like left outside or something. And
yeah, well, it was in a shipping container for a while.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously, I think some of that stuff probably got in there when it was initially damaged.
Mm.
And he said they like cleaned up really thoroughly the back of the car where the most of the damage was, but then didn't really do any cleaning in the front of the car. So bit weird, very sloppy. But as Balin said, he's like, as annoying and frustrating as that is, he can clean the car. Like he would do that anyway. If that was the only thing he had to worry about, I think he'd be like, you know what, it's a win, I'll take it.
Yeah.
But the fact that he gets a howling sound over 50 kilometers per hour, that's a bit of a deal breaker.
Yeah, certainly be a deal breaker for me. Yeah, it's just funny to think of like how much money the insurance company would have spent in total on the repair and the hire car and everything associated with that. Like just like obviously they wouldn't have predicted that when they, because my thinking is like, what would be the lump sum payment versus the cost of just getting it repaired for there? Like if they could have just paid out Balin, like here, have $40,000 or whatever, and go and sort this out yourself versus them paying for it. They wouldn't have expected it to take so long. But
yeah, they would have spent at least half the value of the car, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess part of the problem, right, was because he's got a relatively rare European car, they had to import a lot of parts from Germany, right? And that was one of the main holdups from memory.
Yeah, they sold the Arteon in Australia for a few years, but no one really bought them. Not really sure why, because it's one of the best looking sedans, in my opinion. And yeah, it's like a high quality Passat. And they sell good volumes of those. Like I've got an All-Track, and I've kept that car for a long time because it's been so good. It's sort of just runabout car. And I can't bring myself to sell it because it's just such a good car. It's a diesel, so it's not a high performance one like Balin's, but just super reliable and really comfortable, really good car. So I'll probably just keep that thing till it dies. It's a 2019 model, so it's not like super old or anything. But I have other cars now, so it's not a car I drive daily. I just use it as like a tow vehicle, and when I go fishing and stuff. And I could sell it and probably get okay money for it, but it's just a really handy car to have, and nothing ever goes wrong with it, at least so far. So I'll just keep using it as sort of like the utility vehicle. It does sort of everything, and it does well over 1,000 kilometers off like a 50-liter tank of diesel. So pretty good. Yeah.
Well, I don't have anything interesting to talk about really, and we've been going for an hour and a half now. So anything interesting I was going to talk about, I could probably just leave that for another time.
I was thinking when we were talking about the GPUs, I'm like, we could have done an updated GPU tier list.
Yeah, I was thinking of doing that soon. I've got that in my list of ideas. I want to do ranking the GPUs from this series, but then also ranking GPU series in general. So as in going back and say, where's the 50 series, 40 series, 30 series? How do those all compare against one another? Oh
my God, me doing that on the fly, mate. I struggle to do that with just the current series. Oh.
Yeah, it'd be pretty bad. I mean, I'm not saying do it with every single GPU, but just like saying, was the 50 series better than the 40 series? We'll figure that out. We'll do that at some point.
Can't wait. Nah, that sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to this podcast to the end and getting through all of our ramblings about stuff as usual. We've obviously got the Patreon supporter feed for people that are interested. Ad-free, has a couple of bonus stuff in there as well. If you're a Patreon member, you get access to that at certain tiers, and also access to all the other stuff we have on Patreon. So the Discord community, if you want to chat about all the stuff. You've probably heard all of this if you've listened to Hardware Unboxed videos at the end. BTS content. What else have we got? Monthly live streams, which we'll probably be doing relatively soon, considering we're sort of coming up to Q&A series pretty quickly. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.